So, Chris, what's your where are you from?
Well, let's see. So to go way back, I grew up in California in the Bay Area, specifically Concord. Um, played Little League baseball there until I was 13, I believe. Um, Way back then, there was no travel ball, there was none of that stuff. It was just straight Little League. I played 20, 30 games a season. That was it. Um, Fast forward right before my freshman year of high school. My father got a transfer up to the Pacific Northwest, and we moved to a town called Vancouver, Washington, right outside Portland, Oregon. And from there, went to Hudson's Bay High School. Let's see, in high school, I freshman year I was on the freshman team. Sophomore year I was on the JV team. Spent I think the last week or two up on with the varsity group, and then junior and senior year I was on varsity. Um, Fast forward to 2 years ago, we moved to Texas. So now we live in Tyler, Texas, and enjoying it here. The climate is definitely a little bit different.
Is it nice and
A
humid
little,
today?
little more humid, just a little bit.
Right.
Yeah.
So tell me about your family.
Let's see, married in the year 2000. So we're going to be celebrating our 23rd anniversary in December. We have three children. Christopher, he is 20, and Zachary, he'll be 18 in about a month. And then Brooke, she is going to be a freshman. She will be 15 in October.
So, and you are the proud owner of a horse and a donkey, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah, we all yeah,
Awesome.
my well, let's talk about this real quick. So 20-year-old, 18-year-old, and an almost 15-year-old children. Every about 2 to 3 years, my wife, for some reason, needs a new something
Oh,
something with the heartbeat.
I got you.
So then we have three dogs, a cat, a donkey, and a horse. And besides the donkey and the horse, who we got close to the same time, all those other animals were about 2 to 3 years between each one. And they all came into the family as babies. So I got to find some way to cap this off because
Uh,
she,
because where are you at? Where are you at in the timeline right now? Like since the last,
well, like I said,
got about a year
we
left.
got the horse. Yeah, we got the horse and the donkey within the last year. So
So.
I hopefully we're a few years out, but I need to be stronger. I need to stop saying okay. She starts those conversations, and I'm usually the one that gives in. So
Right. And then you end
yeah.
up probably liking the animal too. So
Oh, of course. Of
yeah,
course.
where that goes.
Two of our puppies I tease. I mean I love them, but I tease their we can find a new home for them at any point. Nobody
Yeah.
like nobody likes it when I say that.
So, what's your most memorable sports experience?
Most memorable? There's a lot. I would say the most memorable, which it could be probably be seen as a negative, but um Albert Pujols hit in the year that I was up in the big leagues, 2004. He hit his furthest home run of that season off of me in Coors Field, and I don't know if you can picture that field in your mind, but it out in left center there the bleachers go way up, and then there's a concourse up top, and he hit it almost up onto the concourse.
I've seen it. When you told me
And
it happened,
then
I YouTubed it.
oh yeah, and then the next spring I was in spring training with the Cardinals, which is who Pujols was with then,
Right.
and the media guide, which goes through all the players in the season before in history, whatever. It had on there in his section of the media guide had a list of all of his home runs the previous year, who it was hit off of and how far it went. And, one of my teammates in a nice gesture decided to highlight that and put it on my seat in front of my locker for me to come in and see. It was funny. It
No,
was funny.
that is so. Did so you use it spring training with Pujols?
Yeah. Yeah, it's cool. I mean, I was very fortunate to get to play for as long as I did and how far I got. And, I didn't have nearly the success that a lot of those type of guys had. But, feel very fortunate that I was just good enough to, be able to spend time around guys like that. And we're going to get into a lot of those conversations, in other episodes of this. But um, a quick story on that. I mean, I remember one day walking through the clubhouse and Pujols was holding court. Had a bunch of position players in a little circle in the clubhouse, having a little meeting with them. And I walked by and he was talking about um, pitchers pitching inside, and saying that, not many pitchers will throw in there consistently. They may come inside every once in a while, for show or maybe for a strike, but very few, excuse me, not many will stay in there. They'll come in there for one or two, but then they're going to go right back out. So he was talking about how his approach was to just let that go. If
Race it.
he like most other hitters, they want to get extended. Um, so if those guys would come inside, just let it go and just keep looking away. And which coincidentally, me walking by
Yeah.
and hearing that, um, the only reason that I was standing in that clubhouse was because I found a way to command the inside part of the plate, and I was kind of the opposite. And I needed to be just because honestly my stuff wasn't good enough. Um, but I hammered the inside part of the plate until I saw the hitter make an adjustment, and then I would go away. So it was interesting to hear him say that. Um, and to go back to that home run he hit off of me, I was trying to throw a fastball. I had two strikes on him. I was trying to go up and in, to get him off the plate a little bit, and I left it too much over the plate, and he did what guys like that do with those pitches.
So when you say your stuff wasn't good, like where did your fastball sit? Just for
Um, at that at that point in my career, and keep in mind, this is back in I got drafted in 96. When I got drafted, the average fastball was 88, 89. If you hit 90, 91, that was pretty special. That's why guys like Nolan Ryan way back when were unbelievable. Hardly anybody threw the way that Ryan did. Um, but at that point in my career, I probably, sat upper 80s, 90, 91, maybe 92 on a good day.
yeah,
I mean, the hardest that I ever, threw was 94, which again, that's an average fastball now.
right.
We trained different. We didn't know as much that we know these days. As far as pitching mechanics and, strength training and all that type of stuff. It's just a different world now. Um, but as my breaking ball, the velocity that comes with the off speed pitches when your fastball is that sort of velocity is not extraordinary. Which these guys that throw these days, it is amazing what they can do with the ball.
It really is.
Um, but my stuff was just, at that time it was just very average. I didn't have a fastball that I could really blow by anybody. So I had to be able to do things like command the inside, throw up when I wanted to, throw inside when I wanted to. All of my different off speed pitches, I had to be able to throw it in any count to any location, righty or lefty batter. Um, that was the only way that I was able to get to that level is because I was able to figure that part out.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That makes sense. It actually makes sense what you're saying. Pujols was saying,
Mm-hmm.
that's
Yeah.
and it's interesting. It's just that's a conversation for later, but it's interesting why that is. why, and they still don't really command a lot of guys don't command the inside part of the plate, and
Well, there's the room for error is a lot smaller.
right,
If you're going to go in and you miss to the left as a righty pitcher, if I miss to the left too much and it leaks over the plate, it's a very hittable pitch.
yep,
Whereas if I'm going away and I miss to the left, it's off the plate.
yep,
So the room for error is a lot smaller. And, you know, this day and age of how hitters react to pitches inside, there's theatrics there and warnings get thrown and, tempers go um and you go down the ladder there and there's a fear of hitting batters,
yeah, I would
that
think that's
there's
right.
a reason why a lot of kids don't like to pitch inside.
I can see that. So what's your
Hmm.
I skipped number three, your sports background. So I know you played through high. I know you talked about where you played high school ball at, but after that, kind of what transpired after that?
I got drafted in 96. The Cubs drafted me. I went in the fourth round. And a few days later, I had signed and they put me on a plane down to at that at, at that time our rookie ball was in Fort Myers, Florida. So like 3 days after I graduated high school, I was on a plane across the country. Um, Spent that summer in Fort Myers, Florida, had a pretty good season. The next year, let's see, I went to A ball, which was in Rockford, Illinois. Shoot, I don't even know if they have a team there anymore. And then let's see, the next four years, I was in the Cubs organization, made it up to AAA. Never made it to the big leagues with the Cubs. Next 2 seasons after that, I was in the Rockies organization. Both spring trainings, though, I was with different teams. So the first year the first season I was in the Rockies organization, I was actually in spring training with the Astros that year, and they let me go right at the end of spring training, and then I hooked up with, excuse me, the Rockies, and then the next season I was in camp with the Giants. They let me go, spent the next month at home, but then ended up back with the Rockies organization, and that was the year that I ended up in the big leagues for a little bit. The next season I was in the Cardinals organization, like we just talked about. Spent the year there in AAA. 2 seasons after that, we were in Japan. I pitched for the Seibu Lions.
That's cool.
Um, yep, Daisuke Matsuzaka, he was a big name over there. He was kind of at that time, he was the big Japanese player that came over here. Let's see, after that came back, pitched in the A's organization for a year, and that
So
year in AAA.
you pitched back here. You pitched in minor league after Japan.
Yeah,
I didn't realize
yeah,
that. Oh, that's
came
cool.
back over here. Yeah, came back over here. Spent the next year in the A's organization, AAA. We won the AAA championship that year, so that was pretty fun.
That's
I'm
cool.
out here in my shop right now. It's starting to rain. I don't know if you can hear it.
No,
Okay, well that's
that's
good.
what these mics are good for that. So
Yeah. And then the next year we went over to Taiwan. I got a contract and played in Taiwan. I played there for I think 4 or 5 months. Um, I asked for my release. It just wasn't a good situation. Asked for my release, came back over, and then finished that season back in the A's organization. Um, I think just for the last month of the season. And then the next year went to spring training with the Rockies, got back in there again. They let me go. So I was like, that's it. That was I think that would have been my 15th season. So I got 14 seasons in and was very, very fortunate and blessed, to have that experience. Um, that helped me get a couple years later. I got a job in the Angels organization coaching with them and coached in that organization for 3 years before I told them that was before my last season there. I told them that was going to be my last, that it was just time for me to go home and be with my family.
Right.
I've been traveling for, at that year, that was my 17th year. And it's a lot of traveling. I missed a lot with the kids, and it was, it was time to go home and be a husband and be a father. And we had opened up a facility back in my hometown then too. That rain's getting loud. Um, we had opened up a facility, so I needed to be there to help that, get off the ground and get going.
Yeah. So how long did you coach in the minor leagues? How,
I can't hear you right now. This rain is so loud.
yeah,
That was the only thing I was concerned about being out here, was if it rains.
I understand. How long did you coach in the minor leagues?
I was with I was with the Angels for 3 years.
Okay.
Um, and I coached, let's see, my first year I was in Cedar Rapids. So that was low A ball. So most of the players we had, it was their second year in professional baseball. After that season, I asked if I could go down to the rookie level, um, which I don't, things have changed since then. Then there was two rookie balls. Um, there was a level where more of the high school guys, young Latino players would go. And then there was where more of college draft picks and second year Latino players would go, which they called it advanced rookie, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
But it was in Orem, Utah for the next 2 seasons, which was their advanced rookie team. So I really enjoyed that level, getting to be around kids right out of the draft, and just almost like teach them how to be how the professional world was different from the college world, which I didn't play ball in college, but I got to learn just how that atmosphere was from former teammates and whatnot. So getting to teach them how to be professionals, and getting to be there and help guide them at the beginning of their career, which there's a lot of guys from those few years that made it to the big leagues. Still a couple players that are in the big leagues right now.
That's cool.
Is just just very fortunate again for all those opportunities.
Yeah. That's awesome. What with the podcast, man, what are you hoping to communicate with people? What are you hoping that if you could sum it up shortly, what are you hoping to communicate to the audience that's listening?
I you know I think it will be a great opportunity, as you know, and I know that we met through social media, because you followed our baseball dude stuff, I think, on Facebook.
Yep.
And I put a lot of stuff out there. I try to hit on stuff from an athlete's perspective to parenting to coaching. I've got to experience all three of those. Um, just try to give some insight onto a whole range of topics. Um, I'm hoping that this podcast can kind of be an extension of that, and be able to to go more in depth and detail of what those topics maybe mean. It's really hard sometimes with technology, and whether it's texting or you know reading a book sometimes, or even reading a post. It's hard to get emotion across, and more explanation. I feel sometimes I could go as much in depth on something as I possibly could, and it still might be misunderstood.
Right.
So hopefully a video type thing, an audio thing, a podcast, um, can help get some of those messages out. And I'm looking forward to possibly us getting some guests on here too, and being able to pick the brains and just hear other voices of people who have experienced different things.
Yeah.
I think one thing is important is not just because I say something or you say something, doesn't mean it's not an absolute. It's just what our experience has been, what we've learned. And I think it could be good situation, good opportunity.
Yeah, I think, man, because I've had a similar experience in it was a different arena of life, but a lot of times people hear everything you're not saying on social media. That's what
Yeah.
they're hearing is what you're not saying. It's like, I know I'm not saying that, and that's kind of to that point what you posted the other day about what scouts are looking for, and then having somebody come on, no, they only care about how you do,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
obviously they do want to see you, they do want to know how to play. Obviously,
Yeah.
nobody's not saying that, but they know how to play or they wouldn't already be there,
Yeah.
and so they
We
want to.
we yeah, we should do an episode or have a segment someday where we talk about social media and our experiences with it and how it's changed the ball game a little bit. And um, it's an interesting thing. It really is. And it's you get opinions left and right. You get, you know, keyboard courage, you get trolls. I mean, it's
Yeah, yeah,
you have to
no,
be able to handle it. I mean, I've learned to not take stuff personal. I mean, it's I've had people over the years that I remember I got a message one time from a guy, man, he had like verbally attacked me and I don't even remember what it was about, but I was like, where is this coming from?
yeah.
Like, all right, whatever. Yeah.
Be like, if you standing face to face, you would not be saying that to me right now.
Oh, that's the biggest thing. You see how people talk to each other on social media, man. They would never do that face to face ever.
No, somebody
No,
might be missing some teeth if they if
oh,
they
key,
did.
keyboard courage, man. It's a
Yeah.
real thing. Yeah.
So, all right, last question. Actually, two more questions. What do you think's the number one issue in youth sports right now? I know there's a lot, and it may
Yeah.
change tomorrow, but
Um, number one issue. Oh boy. I mean, it it could be. I mean, there's people who would say it's a non-issue, but I almost feel, I mean, this is a baseball thing, baseball, softball. I almost feel like there's too much of one sport. Um, specializing, the travel tournament world, it almost like encourages it. It almost like demands, you know, I mean,
allegiance.
obviously, yeah, I'll talk about baseball for a second. I mean, here in Texas, and I'm still, learning about the schedule, how the season is played out is a little bit different here in Texas from the Northwest, simply because of weather, climate. And so, like here in Texas, because the weather is so good, you know, there is baseball going on almost year round. Um,
Play 9 months out of the year.
there's, yeah, yeah, there's a small break after summer, a 3 or 4 week break between tournament season, if that's what you want to call it, and then fall ball starts.
Right.
And then fall ball goes here, I believe it I don't know it by heart yet, but I think it goes like into November in some cases.
It does.
It's like up in Washington, I mean, you get into October and the weather was just hit or miss. But here, there's some teams that will play into November, sometimes maybe even through November, and then they'll take December, January off, and then let's go again. Um, so there's just a lot of it, and then because of that demand that comes with it, whether it's team practice schedules, tournaments, whatever, it really takes away from that opportunity to play other sports. Or there are families that do play other sports, but they do them at the same time, and then that just creates another
Yeah, it's a lot.
burnout issue between the kids and the families. um I don't, some may say it's a non-issue. I think that the kids play too much. um
Yeah.
that's even a topic you could talk to people in the medical world and the injuries they see in youth athletes, and a lot of those injuries are overuse type injuries.
Yeah.
um you know I guess that would be my thing is
Too much.
too much. Too much.
I had a
Yeah.
conversation with uh, a coach. He coaches at Denison High School softball um, in Texas. Name's Chris Anderson, and he's an ex-pro guy, baseball. And we were having this conversation the other day at a tournament. His daughter played on a different team than my daughter, but they were playing each other in this tournament. And one of the things that I see, because I try to shield Camden, meaning we shut her down at some point, and I kind of watch it, and then we go, okay, hey, we're not playing anymore right now. Like I told you, I think yesterday, Camden's done with travel ball for the rest of the summer. She's going into high school in Oklahoma. We play our fast pitch season in the fall, so she's getting ready for her freshman year of high school. And so I told her like we're done. But the conversation I had with Chris the other day, they had played like 6 games that day at this tournament because they'd gotten losers bracket and had to work their way back. And at some point in time, as you know, if you're working with a pitcher or you're working with a hitter in the cage, there comes a point where they've taken so many swings, their swing is going to start breaking down. Like you're being counterproductive because the body's fatigued. You've swung as many times as you need to swing. You need to just stop for the day and come back tomorrow. And you don't need to be taking 700 cuts because at some point in time the swing's not going to get any better because you're just fatigued. And on a larger scale, that's got to be true at these tournaments. That's got to be true where you're playing like 5, 6 games where your level of play has got to be, you're not getting any better playing at that point. You're probably getting worse. And because you're so fatigued, you're better off not playing than you are to keep playing because you're just creating more bad habits. And so I was watching it the other day. I was like, there's no way they can play a high level of softball right now or baseball or whatever they do because there's just no way. They're too gassed. And so I would agree with you that is a major issue because Camden's team, they're going to play into November. She won't, but that team they play into November. And so but she won't. What we do with her is we're shut down now, but she starts 2 days in school practice next week because their first game's the first week of August, their first regular high school game. And so the 2 weeks leading up, they'll be practicing and scrimmaging. And so she'll get a lot of playing between now and October 1. But from October 1 till January 1, we don't touch a softball.
Yeah.
We don't pick it up. We don't do anything. She goes and plays basketball, and now she fights me over it. She fights me over that. I want to go. I'm like, no, you're not throwing. Like, do something else. Do something else. Like, and honestly, by that time, Dad's kind of ready for a break from softball too. It's like everybody needs like we've been doing softball now for like 5 months. Let's just take a break. So I'd agree. So all right. So last question for you. Did you ever have, and this is the one that's from the hip, just did you ever have any major arm issues? Yes or no, and why? If it's no, why was that? And if it's yes, why was that?
Major. Well, as a thrower, there's always something.
Did you ever have any surgeries?
So I had one surgery in 99. So this was my after my second season in pro ball. I had an acromioplasty in my right shoulder. So it's a little bone that comes out, and it was explained to me that there's a lot of people that have it. It's sometimes almost, I think I remember the term birth defect, but like as you grow, the acromion comes in, it almost like has like a little hook at the end of it, and that can cause an impingement in there. So they went in there and they shaved off that little hook or spur, whatever it was, just to free up that space. And that's a very minor surgery.
Right.
That
No Tommy
that
Johns,
was
no like labor
no
room, things like that.
no I never had anything major, which very fortunate. I mean, I pitched over 1,500 innings in my career and didn't really I'd tendonitis often. When I would get tired, I'd get bicep tendonitis,
I've
which
had that.
which runs up and it's right in the front of your shoulder here. Um, I would get dead arm frequently, which is fatigue. Um, but I mean, as you're going through it, it's your job, and you start to recognize the signs of when it's coming, and you know when to back up, you know how to manage it. Didn't really have anything, no major surgeries besides that. But just learn how to manage myself, and I think one of the reasons why I was able to stay away from those big injuries uh, was because I took care of my body. Um, I took care of my arm religiously, especially after this. I mean, that was in 99. For the next 10 years, I mean, I did band stuff for my arm after every time I was on a mound, whether it was a bullpen, excuse me, or pitching in a game.
Yeah.
Um, Mechanically, I was able to get my body to work in a way where it took stress off of my arm versus, there's lots of pitching deliveries that add stress to it. And then I think for me, the biggest one, which a lot of my teammates thought I was crazy, was especially as a starting pitcher, which I had more of a regular schedule. I would not pick up a baseball the day before a start or the day after. Um,
Huh.
and that
Kind of
was,
interesting.
yep. So that was, and again, it took me years to kind of get to this
Interesting.
point,
I like that.
but I figured out that I needed to do that to make sure that I was 100% for
Yeah.
day 5. Um, and again, but also, I mean, because of that. So day 1, I didn't throw. Day 2, I would do long toss, and then I would get on the mound for about 20, 25 fastballs only. Day 3, I would play catch just enough to get loose. And then I'd go and throw a full bullpen, 30, 35, 40 pitches. And then day 4, I wouldn't pick up a ball. So
Yeah.
if I, whatever team I was on, if I was in the rotation, every day that I threw a baseball, I was also getting on a mound. So
That's
again, those were things
that makes
that
sense.
I learned. Yeah, things that I learned to keep me, one, healthy and at 100% by the time day 5 came, and then 2, to keep me as sharp as possible with all of my pitches.
That makes sense, especially getting
Yeah,
on the mound and getting that feel, not throwing. Did you throw
yeah.
much flat ground?
Not later on in my career. No,
Yeah, there was no point, was
no.
there?
I mean, I was getting on the mound every day.
Right.
So, but again, that was my routine. I had the luxury of being at that point in my career where my coaches would say, "Hey, what do you need today?" versus the coaches saying, "Hey, this is what you're going to do today."
Yeah.
You get to that certain level, and this is adults working with adults. It's not adults working with kids.
Yeah.
And
Take less
there's a
serious.
level of, yeah, there's a level of respect there, and you get to that point, and the coaches, they're there mainly for what do you need. It's not,
Yeah.
how can I help you? You're going to throw a bullpen. What time is that going to be so I can make sure I'm there?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
whereas
They're not
youth
babysitting
ball
you.
and yeah, yeah, yeah. And I helped before we moved up to Texas. Excuse me. I helped coach at a junior college as much as I could. I wasn't able to be there every day. And it was, you know, I did my best to help, some of our pitchers, learn to be that way, to be independent, and what works for you, and let's try this. And it's not, there doesn't have to be absolutes, especially when you teach and you encourage, independence. Um, but there's different approaches to it for sure.
I think that's a really good topic for at some point is talking about um how some coaches and I guess maybe people would have back in the day called him a player's coach. I don't really like that term, but how some coaches foster development in their kids, and they give them the freedom to be athletic, the freedom to compete, the freedom to go play the game, versus coaches who just have a thumb on everything and basically are just trying to play each position almost through that kid or through their players instead of just letting their players play. And I there's a
Mm-hmm.
there's a coach here in Oklahoma. He's retired now. He was a junior college coach. They were ranked, and I actually talked to one of his ex players this past week about this. And this ex player was an All American, hit 28 bombs one year for him at this JUCO, and they were ranked number one multiple times, but they just never could win it. And the coach was extremely hard to play for. And I asked this his ex player, I was like, do you think they never could win it? Because he just had a stranglehold on his players. He goes, that's why he never could win it. He goes, because
Mm-hmm.
he just had a stranglehold on his players all the time. And they just never was. And
Yeah.
they would get there, but they just never could win it. And but his players never felt free to play, you know,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
there's something to that. I've seen that with multiple coaches over the years where they had the talent, they just didn't have the security to let their players go be who they were, you know.
The hard one that I've experienced it and been around it is where the coaches will try to encourage that freedom, but then
Get
when
on to them
mistakes
when
are
they
made,
make it. Yeah.
the players are made to feel like they
Just
are horrible
dumb. They're
competitors.
yeah, they're dumb. Yeah.
I'm
Why would
and
you make that
I'm
decision?
just like, man, the that is so hard for athletes to learn how to manage,
The mix
and it's
two different.
that's where trust is broken. That's where,
Oh
yeah,
yeah. That was something I learned. That was something I learned the older I got. And it shouldn't be the case, but I do think you see it on the college level. You probably see it. I mean, how can and this is just my assumption. I could be completely wrong about this, but I would say the higher level you get, the more quality and understanding you're going to get into, which there's
mhm,
exceptions to all that rule, but you see so many coaches, it's just about them getting their pats on the back. You know,
yeah,
it's about how many wins they can rack up. It's about what they can accomplish, and the player is just a tool to get their ego stroked. And you see that in youth sports. So all almost 99% of the issue is it's those coaches' ego. It's these parents' ego. It's the ego and people needing to be validated because they win. And you see that. I played for, and one of the posts you make that you share often that really resonates with me is the one of the different coaches you played for. And you played for
yeah,
some that was great and some that had no business being where they were at. And everybody has
hmm,
that experience growing up. If you
yeah,
played for very long, I don't care if you played through college or played through high school, you're going to be around coaches who had no business being out there. And I had coaches that I played for. Looking back now, I'm like, they probably didn't handle me right at the time. I think our generation was a little different growing up because if a coach was hard, I was just taught you just suck it up and take it. Like you just go play. Like you keep your mouth shut. You just go. And because I look back
hmm,
now and I played for some coaches that were probably egomaniacs.
yeah, oh yeah,
It, and so looking back now, it's like they probably had no business coaching anybody. And but then I look back and there were some coaches that I'm like, man, them guys, and what's so crazy is some of the egomaniacs were older, and then I played for a coach that was fresh out of college. That he was one of the best coaches I ever played for. Man, he was
yeah,
twenty
yeah.
three, 24 years old, and he
It's
just under
character. It's how, yeah, character, how these guys are brought up, whatnot. Yeah,
yeah. And so it's one of those deals. You're going to run into that. You're just going to run into coaches who are doing it because it's about them, and hopefully
Yeah.
that's one of the things. Hopefully, through this podcast we can help other coaches realize, listen, there's a way that you can do this where at the end of it, when you're coaching players, those players look back and they go, you know what, that guy right there, he cared about me. That guy cared more. He cared
Yeah.
about the right things.
Yeah.
And that's ultimately, I think, what it boils down to is there are people who care about the right things. There's people who don't care about the right things. And so,
Yeah. 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 All right. Well, ready to get into these questions?
yeah.
Okay. All right. First question. Where are you from? Where are you sitting right there and talking to us from?
So I grew up and I live in Antlers, Oklahoma. That's where I'm at these days. That's where I live in southeast Oklahoma. It's where I grew up. Um, when I graduated here in 2000 and graduated college at Southeastern Oklahoma State University in Durant, and then lived in Central Oklahoma for a while where I coached and taught school. Moved back to Antlers in 2010 and have lived here ever since. So it's
Okay.
Southeast Oklahoma is people they think of Oklahoma and they think prairie, but the eastern side of Oklahoma, specifically the southeastern part, it is they call them mountains or big hills basically. Oklahoma has the world's largest hill. It's Kavanaugh Hill in Poto, Oklahoma. So it's one to be a mountain, it has to be 2,000 feet. Kavanaugh is 1,999 feet tall.
Come
And
on.
so and so it
How
is
far are you from Oklahoma City?
about 2.5 hours.
Okay.
It's very rural,
Southwest,
southeast of Oklahoma City.
southeast. Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So
Okay.
um, I can be in Arkansas in about an hour. I can be in Texas in about 45 minutes, and I
Mm.
can be in Louisiana in about hour 15.
Okay. So you're way southeast. How
So,
far from Broken Bow?
about 45 minutes from Broken Bow and
Okay.
Hochtown, Beavers Bend, all of that.
We hope to go up there and visit there sometime soon. All right, and tell us a little bit about your family.
So, my wife's name's Ambra. We've been married in September. It will be 18 years in September. And then I have 4 kids. I have 3 daughters and a son. My oldest daughter is 14. My middle daughter is 12. My youngest daughter is 8, and my son is 4. And they'll all be in school this year. My oldest daughter's moving into high school. She'll be a freshman, and then my middle daughter, she'll be in junior high this year.
Awesome.
And
And then what's your background in sports?
so I played. Um, I grew up playing baseball and football. Played football through little league, and then I went to a school. It was a little bitty class in Oklahoma. It's called Class B. It's a little small school there can be, called Soper. It was Soper High School, Soper School, Soper, Oklahoma, and that's where I went. So they didn't have football. They play in Oklahoma. They play small schools play fall baseball and spring baseball, so you get 2 seasons with small schools. And I think that goes up. Most schools in Oklahoma start. You have to get to 3A before you have football. So 2A and down for the most part all play two seasons of baseball. And so I played baseball growing up, and then when I was a sophomore, I moved to Antlers where I actually lived. I transferred schools there, and started playing football again in high school and played baseball there. From there, I went and played JUCO baseball, 2 years of JUCO, and then finished up my career at Southeastern Oklahoma State University in 2005. And that's where I graduated from. And then from there, I I graduated teacher and got a job in Central Oklahoma at a school called Agra. It's another small school. Was a head coach there for a year, and then moved down the road to a school called Kearney and was head coach there for 2 years. So that would be 2006 through 2009, I guess. And during that time, I um, coached junior and senior Sun Belt during that time. You being from California, I don't know if you're familiar with Sun Belt, but when that first started getting going, um, I guess I don't know what the first year they did it. I would say probably early mid '80s. It was actually just the Oklahoma and California series, and so they would take all the for the most part what it would be in Oklahoma would be the all state team. The all state team would make up the Oklahoma seniors, and then California would bring their quote
Mm-hmm.
unquote best seniors, and then one year they'd play in California, one year they'd play in Oklahoma, and then that kind of branched out into what was called the Junior Sun Belt. And the Junior Sun Belt was more than just two states, though. The Junior Sun Belt, when I was there, excuse me, it included Texas, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Georgia, Mississippi. Canada brought a team down. I'm trying to think of who else was involved in it. Nebraska was in it. Um, California was in it. Um, there's a couple other states, but I can't remember who they were now. Arizona was in it, and so we would play it here at McAlester, Oklahoma, and then at Eastern Oklahoma State College at Wilburton. And so they would bring their best juniors. Oklahoma would have their best junior, and everybody'd play. Really, really high, I mean, level talent. The year that one of the years that I coached Mississippi, 19 of the 21 kids they brought had signed D1. So I
Wow.
mean, it was really high level. I mean, you would go see juniors that would be 93, 94 miles an hour off the
And
bump.
I'm assuming this still goes on right now.
That was put on a guy named John Swartz, who was the Oklahoma president of the Oklahoma Coaches Association. He was also National Coach of the Year at one time. He was for lack of a better word, he was kind of a big wig as far in Oklahoma as far as high school baseball went and nationally. He was the one.
Mm-hmm.
Him and a guy from Tulsa started that with some people in California, and it had started going downhill because John had started getting older and couldn't tend it like he used to.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and he and John passed away, and when he started getting in really bad health a few years ago, um, he handed it off to some people, and then they kind of took it and rebranded it, and it's just never has done what it had. Travel ball and different like perfect game and things like that are out there now. I think that people probably didn't see the need to do
Mm-hmm.
what because when I was in high school, when I was when I was coaching it, it was still fairly big, kind of fairly big deal. But when I was in high school, it was a huge deal because if you went to the junior Sun Belt, that's where all the scouts were. The stadium, because that's where the best juniors in almost all the Southeast United States, they were all coming to this. So it was that one event where if I'm a scout, I can catch 100 D1 caliber players and I can see them all in one place. And so
Mm-hmm.
that it would just be full of pro scouts and college scouts and but now due to social media and information, I mean people don't have to try to travel to get a first look at somebody.
Yeah.
You can it's just so much easier to get seen now, and I think the necessity of it ran. I think it just ran its course, and it just didn't work in the day and age we live in, and so
Mm-hmm.
it just kind of I don't even know if they do it anymore. I know they had rebranded it, but it definitely had lost its purpose and what it was about. But at one time, I mean, it was huge, and
Yeah.
like I said, the
So,
whole stadium would be full of radar guns and scouts,
mhm.
and that's where you wanted to be if you wanted to get seen.
Yeah, times have changed. I grew up playing Legion ball in high school, and I'm sure it's still alive in some parts, but I don't think it's nearly what it used to be.
They're trying. Oklahoma was huge for Legion. That was if you wanted to play in the summertime, you played Legion ball,
Yeah.
and I know they're trying to get that back up and going. There's a guy, he reached out to me probably 6 months ago on Facebook. Um, there is Lloyd Simmons, who was the coach at Seminole State University. Um, he won. He sent. He won a lot of games. Sent so many people to the draft through Seminole. At one time, if you wanted to go JUCO, Seminole, San Jack in South Texas and Seminoles where you wanted to be. And Simmons is retired now, but he's trying to get Legion ball back and going inside the state. But I
Hmm.
know that they've been trying for a while and it's a really slow go.
Yeah.
They're not and he's got a lot of he's got a lot of pull. He has a lot of influence and they're not
At that age, travel ball and showcase stuff is just I mean, it's where everything is now.
yeah.
It's kind of
Showcases,
dominates.
if you're wanting to get seen, why, the showcase is what you're trying to go do. And
Yeah.
so why, you know, and I understand it. I understand it.
Hmm.
Why go grind out 60 games in the summer trying to get seen when you can go play 4 or 5 showcases and get in front of all the scouts because that's where they're at.
Yeah.
And so there's pros and cons to both.
Yeah. All right, next question. What is your most memorable experience in sports?
Mm, that's a good question. So probably as a coach, I told you I coached at Kearney, Oklahoma. So Kearney was a baseball school. They had went to the state tournament the year before I got there. The coach had left and took a job at Dale, Oklahoma. So they hired me, and we we had a chance to go to the state tournament that fall. Got beaten a really tough game in regionals. Um, Spring rolled around, had a good got beaten regionals again to go state tournament. Um, and then the school ends up passing that they're going to try to do 8-man football. They're going to start 8-man football. So that meant that they was going to take away their fall baseball.
Hmm.
So I had two of my best players, actually three of my best players. They're like, we're not going to not like they were going to be juniors and seniors, and they were like, we want to play fall baseball. We don't want to play football. We've never played football in our life. So they transfer out. So I'm left in Class B, small school. They were my 3, 4, 5 hole, and my 1, 2, 3. They were my 1, 2, 3 pitchers,
Oh
and
boy.
so I was left with I was I had a chance to go to the state tournament again. Then I was left with trying to like, hey, I need you to come out so we can have a team, asking kids to come
Hmm.
out and play.
Hmm.
And so we were not very good, right? And but the kids I had were I loved them. I loved the kids that came out. And at the end of that year, um they at the sports banquet, they they got me this bus. And there's a backstory to this, but because of something some a smart aleck comment somebody had made. But they got me they bought this little like toy school bus, and it's like the most absurd thing you've ever seen, and they all signed it and told me thank you,
Hmm.
and they were like one hell of a bus driver, wrote that on that deal. And that's probably my most memorable, you
Hmm.
know thing in sports. It was just, we were terrible, they knew we was terrible, but we did the best we could, and we had a
Hmm.
good time, and we worked at it, and we could have worked for 10 years. We wasn't going to win. we wasn't going to win a whole lot,
Yeah.
and but they worked hard for me, and we did the best we could, and competed the best we could, and with what we had, and we had a good time, and most of those kids stay in touch with me, um, you know, and so that's probably my most memorable sports
Yeah.
is with those. There's all kinds of other playing stuff that's funny and different things, but that probably meant more to me than anything.
Love it. Love it. All right, next question. So you have started up softball chicks,
Yes.
and what are you hoping to communicate to your audience via that platform and with this podcast stuff?
You know, Chris, I hope that um I shared a post yesterday, and a lot of people don't realize that even science will show that our heart actually communicates more signals to our brain than our brain does to our heart. So the heart is the only autonomous organ in the body, meaning that you can be completely brain dead and your heart still be beating. The heart actually starts beating in the womb before brain is formed. And they don't really understand why that is or how that is, but the heart has, quote unquote, its own kind of brain. And so what I'm hoping to communicate with that is to get people to realize that to really be free and to really be able to enjoy the game and to play it, the heart's got to be kind of open. The heart's got to be free. You got to be able to be um, relaxed, and you got to be able to have fun. You got to be able to enjoy it and be competitive all at the same time. So the idea is that I play with an open heart and a focused mind, and so I hope that is what I'm able to communicate in a way that that they understand that when you get on the field to play and it's time to compete, that's when the heart opens. That's when you just lay it all out. That's when you let it fly. And if you are tight, if you are and trying to make a long statement short, if if your if your emotions in your brain are firing and they're in constant contradiction to each other, you're never going to be able to compete on any kind of level whatsoever. If you can get all of that, if you can get your emotions and your mind all working together through your body, then you can get out and do amazing things on the field. That's the reason you can take kids, and the Savannah Bananas are a perfect example of that, actually. And I know they have their goofiness and all of that stuff, but my point is they get out there and you'll see those guys make crazy plays, like dive, and that's not scripted. That part
Mhm.
is not scripted. You see them do crazy plays, and the reason is because they're just out there, just free.
Yeah.
They're just free, and I think the best players, and you can probably attest to this, every time you level up, whether that's from little league to pony league or junior high to high school or high school to college, there's this part of, you know, am I good enough? Can I compete on this level? And then after a few at bats or after a few games, you realize, hey, I'm just as good. Then all of a sudden you can relax and you can just go do your thing. And that is what I'm hoping to communicate is for there's a way to be able to be competitive and enjoy doing what you're doing. And that's what I hope to communicate to kids, is that it doesn't have to be this tight, white knuckled approach to the game. You can't approach life that way. And it
Mhm.
doesn't matter if it's softball or anything else, you can't white knuckle this thing.
Mhm.
And it's got to flow from the heart and in connection, in conjunction with the mind. And if somebody can do that, then they can do amazing things.
Absolutely. That's a deep conversation. We'll get into it for sure in another episode of this. All right. What do you think is the number one issue in youth sports?
I was thinking about this yesterday, actually. I think FOMO is the number one issue right now going on. The fear of missing out. That's what FOMO stands for, fear of missing out. I think that's a huge, I think that's a huge issue. I think parents are um the instigators of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they think that if my kid is not here, or if they're not getting in there, like we talking about showcases, if they're not at this, the metrics, all the metrics that's out there, well, my kid's got to be here. My kid's got to be here. I told my wife, and I know you have seen it too. I told my wife years ago, we were talking, Camden was probably in coach pitch, my oldest daughter, and she was talking about all these different kids. I was like, Amber, most of those kids won't even be playing by the time they're in high school. Most of them won't be playing. She
Mm-hmm.
goes, what do you mean? I said, I just watch. I was like, most of them won't be playing. And she just last year, she was like, you remember when you told me most of those kids wouldn't be playing? She's like, they're not. And I said, but because I've been around it and I've seen it. And just because a kid's a great athlete at 10 years old
Mm-hmm.
has little bearing on what that kid's going to be when he's 18 years old or she's 18 years old. You don't even know if they're going to play.
Yeah.
And there's all this like, I've got to get recruited right now. And it's like your post you made the other day about coaches wanting to see you fail.
Mm-hmm.
Scouts are looking at so many other things other than you hit a ball 450 feet. They're looking at so many other things than that. And we get so focused on results oriented, and we get so focused on performance driven that we think we've got to do X, Y, and Z, and that's what's going to get me here. And it's just not the case a lot of times. And obviously, you have to play. You've got to be a player. But if they're watching you, they already know you're a player.
Yeah.
And there's this fear of, oh my gosh, if I don't perform, they're gonna look past me, or I'm not gonna get seen. So there's this fear that I'm missing out if I don't do certain things, if I don't go certain places, if your 12-year-old's not throwing 80 miles an hour. Oh my God. And it's like I've seen kids that were I was that way. I was that way. I was a fat little kid at 10 years old, you know, and but when I turned my sophomore year in high school, just something clicked.
Mm-hmm.
There was talent there the whole time, but something clicked. And then as soon as it was just late maturing. And you have early matures and you have late matures. I had a kid I went to high school with that he grew 8 inches after high school.
Hmm.
He was he was 5'6" or 5'7" his senior year, and he's like 6'3" now. And he did all of that after high school. And I was like, I wish you could have turned that on in high school. We could have used that, you know. I give him a
Mm-hmm.
hard time, but you don't, and that's
No control of it.
the fear of missing out is a huge, and it's driving, but fear in general drives all of this stuff.
Mm.
Fear drives, like what we were talking about the heart and mind. Fear controls a lot of our human behavior and how we're approaching youth sports, how we're approaching with our kids and coaches. It's a lot of it's fear based, and parents have this fear that their kid is, and ultimately I think it boils down to they're just worried that their kid's not enough. Their fear that maybe my kid don't have what it takes. And one of the best things I ever heard about that was Mike Huckabee, the guy who he was the governor of Arkansas, ran for president. I heard him say one time that I think he was a freshman, and he said that he tried out for his high school football team, and he got cut. They thought it was like, you're not good enough. And said he got cut from his high school football team. He said, but they were looking for somebody to announce the football games. He goes, so I went, and he goes, I got the part of announcing the football games, and I started public speaking. And he was like, public speaking turned out pretty well for me. And
Mm-hmm.
he goes, but if they hadn't have told me I wasn't good enough to do football, I might not have ever found what I was great at, which was the public speaking. And he said, my rejection opened up the door for what would eventually become my life. And I thought that was a great, perspective about that. And I think that people are just so, um, it's just fear. People are scared that they're not enough, they're not going to measure up, and they're worried about that with their kids.
Yeah. Learning to trust the process and having that faith that everything's happening the way it's supposed to happen. That's a hard thing to really grasp,
Yeah.
especially with all the emotions intertwined in youth sports, the adult emotions.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
trying to get their kids somewhere, and and there's probably a time there's a time where parents get involved with their kids and like, okay, hey, you have a legit, possibility of doing something with this. Let's do some things here
Mm-hmm.
and put you in the right places. And that is a good thing. But, they're just it's obvious that we're starting that way too young. We're starting to
Yeah.
worry about that at way too young of an age, and putting stress. Man, I don't remember having pressure on me in little league. You know what I'm saying? I don't remember. I just remembered playing with my friends.
Yeah.
Like I
Well,
just it was just it
excuse
was
me.
summer league baseball, and you went up here, and it was it was go play baseball and then go to the swimming pool.
Yeah.
It was it
Yeah.
was it wasn't Sandlot, but it was almost like the Sandlot. I mean, it was that kind of approach to it.
Another deep conversation for another day. All right, last question. And you don't know about this one. Who was your favorite, most impactful coach that you've had growing up and why?
Hmm. I would say my last year of Legion baseball, my senior year, was a guy named Eddie Combs, and he was fresh out of college, and he didn't necessarily teach me a lot about baseball, but what he did do is we had a kid on that team that got drafted in the 11th round named Garrett Patterson. He is from McAllister. McAllister had just won the 5A state championship. Um, they had several kids. Their all-state shortstop was on that team. Um, they had several kids on that team, and a cousin of mine named Clay Mack and we were on that same team with him. And there was, I don't know, 4 or 5 other kids from kind of small schools that was there on that team. And Eddie started my cousin over the all-state shortstop
Hmm.
from McAllister. But my cousin was better than him. He just was. And dude, he caught all kinds of hell from the parents, from everybody. We were we were playing at Edmond Santa Fe as a wooden bat tournament, and it was one of those deals where one of the parents got mad, come down, like cussed him out in front of the team, took their kid. I mean, this kid was 18 years old.
Mm-hmm.
It was crazy, and he just never backed down, and he just played who he felt like was the best players, and by doing that, he was like, it communicated, I believe in you. I believe in you. And I did the best with coaches I felt like believed in me. And you don't I ran into a lot of coaches that whether they realized it or not, what they were communicating to me was, all I care about is myself and how, if I can win. And the coaches that I felt like believed in me, I had my freshman year of college, Coach McBrayer, he's the head coach at Grayson Community College now, at softball, but he was baseball back then. He was that way. If I struggled, man, he just left me in there and let me work through it, and it just communicated, I believe in you. You're my
Mm-hmm.
guy. I believe in you. And so that was the most impactful people for me. It wasn't. I played for Coach Bowen, one of the winningest coaches in the Oklahoma State history in baseball, and he taught me more baseball than anybody. but it was the coaches that I felt like was communicating, hey, I believe in you. Like I
Mm-hmm.
believe and I trust you. And even if you struggle, I you're my guy. And and so that Eddie was probably the most impactful in that way for me. It wasn't about learning the game. It was about, you know, him standing up for what he thought was right, and that communicated something to his players, And there's so many coaches that won't do those things because they have for whatever reason. And so he just that was communication I got, and I that he was probably the most impactful on me.
Well, that goes right along the lines of what you're hoping to, the message you want to send through this, that heart stuff and trust and playing relaxed. And I mean, when you get around coaches, I've experienced them too. I mean, I've experienced both sides.
Yep.
When you get around those coaches who they allow you to fail, I mean, one of the, and again, I have to remind myself often that I experienced a world for nearly 20 years that was like everything we did was about development. Literally from the day one I stepped into a professional clubhouse, it was about development. And even at that higher level, it's still about development. Even though they're out there and there's more, money going on and it's a lot of it's wind driven, it's still everybody's out there trying to get better. The process of trying to get better never stops. And I mean, I'll never forget, and I take this with me to what I do now. If a relief pitcher goes out there and has a horrible inning, can't make it out of the inning, one of the goals as a coaching staff is to get that pitcher back in another game as soon as possible. If we can get him,
Makes
if there's a
sense.
right situation, we're putting him in the game the next day,
That makes sense.
right? Where I mean, because again, you have to convey that message of we believe in you. You know, those things happen. You're gonna have a bad day. You're gonna cost your team that W. It is what it is. Everybody out here has done that before, but
Yep.
we need to get your mind back to a place of believing yourself, and we can't let that bad day simmer inside of you and build into something bigger than what it needs to be. And
That's so good,
un
man.
unfortunately, youth sports it's in most situations it's the complete opposite. If a kid has a bad tournament or whatever, I mean, they dump him down to the bottom of the lineup, give him less at bats, take him completely out of the lineup. Even worse is these stories you hear about coaches yanking kids off the field in the middle of an inning,
Crazy.
because they've made an error. And I mean, there's some cases, especially at the lower levels, where these kids are, you know, mentally they are so far gone, tears and whatever's happening out there on the field that it's probably best to get that player off the field.
Right.
But that should not be a habit, and again, it's just a different way of, I guess, looking at the game that, the pressure that these kids feel because of how coaches handle it, coaches, and parents, it's like we're hanging on every single pitch, every single play, every single swing. We really struggle to trust that process and convey that feeling of trust, and we believe in you. And there's some great coaches out there, don't get me wrong, but you go to a lot of these tournaments and you're going to see a lot of stuff happening that does not get that message across.
I will tell you this. I played and I played for a coach in college who is in the top 20 all-time wins, D1, NAIA, D2, any university, right? And he's in the top 20 wins all time. And my first week on campus, we were hitting BP on the field, and I hit two or three balls and kind of pulled off of him, flared them to right field, right? So they're just looping fly balls into right field. He comes over to me and says, Andrew, I didn't bring you out here to hit fly balls to right field. I want you to hit everything to left field and try to hit it out of the park. That was his development.
Mhm.
That was the only hitting instruction he ever gave me, was that. And this guy's won. And my point to that is like, just because somebody wins, especially in college, doesn't mean that they are development mindset. Because in
Mhm.
college you can recruit well,
Yeah.
you can go get talent, and wins is not a representation of really even somebody's coaching ability.
Yeah.
And I think that's a misconception, um, especially when you can go out and get players. It's probably more of a representation maybe in high school where you have to play the hand you're dealt, because that's the kids you have. If
Mhm.
somebody has a history of creating a culture and winning in high school level because you're playing the kids you have, but in college, and I would say probably even in pros, that's not necessarily a representation of how, what I would say, good somebody is at coaching. And coaching, there's a difference between understanding the game versus trying to coach a player. And
Mhm.
and uh and so I would say I played till I was 22. I would say and I started when I was 5. So what's that, 17 years, In my 17 years, I think I played for more people that they were more about, and I guess I should back up and say this. I think a lot of it has to do with the generation, because the guy I just mentioned, when I played for him, he was 65 years old, and he grew up. I mean, he was born World War II.
Mhm.
You,
Mhm.
you know what I mean? Like, his parents were World War II people, and so it's just different generations and how they see things and how they go about things. A lot of that coming from that era is just pull yourself up by your bootstraps and get it done. And don't no, we're not worried about your mental state or your emotional state. You just figure out how to get it done and go do it.
Yeah.
and and so there's some of that. And it's just a mindset that's not. I do say that mindset's getting more and more because of conversations like these. It's getting more prevalent and more relevant inside of sports, because people's going, okay, there's more to this than just me trying to win. And people are even seeing it with the little kids going, we're doing all this to win a ring. Like, we got, like, you played 60 games, you got 10 rings, and at the end of summer, everybody's tired, everybody's sunburnt, everybody's like at their wits end, and we got some rings. And people, I think people are going, why are we doing this? Why are and asking that
Yeah.
question, why and how are we going about things? And these conversations that you and I are having are good to help try to go, there's more to this than just going out there trying to win.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've been teaching in the youth scene for long enough now to know that like there are some families that really enjoy that culture.
Oh
They
yeah.
enjoy the traveling, and it's a time that they spend together with their family, and
Yep.
that's what they thrive on, that. And that's great. And then there's some families that get into it and they're like, this is too much. You know, this isn't necessarily how we want to spend our money. We want our summer vacations. And they end up taking a step back, and it's everybody's different, and different people enjoy different things. And,
Yeah.
there's in the end, when these kids have graduated high school and mom and dad don't get to go and watch them play all the time, um, every single one of them reflects, and they probably think that there's some things they wish they would have done different, and
Yeah.
whether there's regret or little to no regret, everybody's different. Someone may regret something and the other person who experienced the same thing doesn't,
Yeah.
so but unfortunately it's, that travel ball, traveling 3 hours to play a team that you live 5 minutes from. Um,
We've done that.
that's
multiple
That's
times.
that's become the way of youth sports, and I believe, I mean, I can't say this for a fact, but I believe that's happening in a lot of sports, a lot of youth sports.
Basketball is just
Um,
as bad.
yeah, I mean, you're traveling long distances to play teams, not just a team, teams from your area. I would love to see, a lot of these, travel teams, tournament teams, whatever you want to call it, select elite. I don't, a name is what it is. Create some sort of local league, where you guys
Yeah.
play amongst each other and then go play, in a couple tournaments, a few tournaments a season, but keep it more local. And these kids are going to compete against each other in high school.
Yep.
um let's get back to some of that community stuff. um but I think it's easier, to just play games on the weekends and then have the week to have one or two practices, but that's it. Again, it's just become the way of it. And it's, again, very different from how you and I grew up. For the
Very.
better, for the worse. Every
Got
family may
pros and
have different
cons.
feelings about that.